the same time as it can feel hopeful, it's also quite a toxic idea, I think, that just one person can save the world or society or whatever it may be. You can't just take one person and they defeat the evil and then everything's fine, and we just like move on now, and we won't worry about why that happened in the first place, or what systems were in place to cause this evil to come to power.
Welcome to Speculative Sandbox, your audio playground for creative storytellers. My name is Vicky Lawn, and each episode, I and a guest will unpack a fiction trope with an eye for character development and narrative structures. Make sure to look for Speculative Sandbox on Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter, where you can join the conversation. Leave comments or questions, or let us know what other tropes we should cover. When the real world just doesn't cut it, let's get lost in a fictional one. Douglas Adams once wrote, "It's one thing to think that you're the center of the universe. It's another thing entirely to have this confirmed by an ancient prophecy." Now add in a catastrophe on a global scale, and you have the perfect ingredients for a Chosen One narrative. Author Lucy A. McLaren joins me to talk about The Chosen One, how it's taken on a new form in recent years, and how the circumstances for a Chosen One can actually be the perfect setup for the villain. I have a head cold, so if I sound nasally or if I'm like foggy headed, I am sorry.
Oh, bless you. Don't worry, I'm coming out of like a 3-day migraine, so
Oh no, we're in great shape today.
yeah.
Well, thank you so much for spending some time with me, an hour out of your day. I really appreciate it. I was excited when you selected The Chosen One as a topic because it's one I've been wanting to talk about for a while. So I guess to get us started, can you share a little bit about yourself and your current projects and why you like the Chosen One trope?
Sure. So I'm Lucy A. McLaren. I'm a fantasy author. Currently working on a trilogy called The Commune's Curse. The first of which, called Awakening, released in May, just gone. So I'm working on book 2 of that at the moment, alongside various other kind of fantasy things. I've always got like some idea ticking away, so like short stories or like longer things, as and when I have time to, because I'm trying to juggle that along with raising a 1-year-old. So it's proven an interesting balance to try and strike, certainly. But I'm hopefully getting to more of a place where I can feel like I'm a writer again, rather than just a parent who sometimes writes. So that's been a challenge. But The Chosen One for me, I feel like it's interesting because it is so prevalent in fantasy, right? I've been a fantasy fan since childhood. Like I grew up reading the like Enid Blyton Magic Faraway Tree books, and then stuff like Tamora Pierce's Song of the Lioness Quartet was like an epiphany for me when I was about 11, I think, and suddenly kind of fell in love with the fantasy genre. And like the Lord of the Rings films came out when I was about 12, so all these kind of things just led to me loving fantasy. And The Chosen One is just so popular in the fantasy genre that I feel like it'll be an interesting one to talk about, because I think it's really, really popular, but at the same time, people sometimes get a bit, I think, annoyed maybe with how much it's used.
Mm-hmm.
But
Yeah.
for me, I just, yeah, I haven't used it really outwardly in my books, but I've kind of tried to subvert it a little bit in that there is someone with incredible powers, but she's not a main character. She's a 6-year-old girl. She's the sister of one of the main characters. Yeah.
In the book that you're currently writing?
In Awakening, the one that came out in
Oh,
May.
in
So
the Awakening. Okay, gotcha.
it's all linked. But yeah, so I kind of, she's not the chosen one necessarily, but she would probably fit into the, maybe the rules or whatever you want to call it, as to what defines a chosen one, and that, got incredible powers and can will possibly end up being a big part in how things turn out. Possibly not, but it's, I don't know. That's why I want to subvert it a little bit. Like, I think this is where it comes into people getting a bit frustrated with the chosen one being used, because you can kind of predict it in a way. And I think it's important for authors to try and step outside of that a little bit now and think how they can change it.
That's a really good point. I know so first of all, I can totally relate on being a parent and also a writer and finding that time, especially when so much of your brain gets used up by the child.
Oh yeah.
It's such a challenge.
Mm,
But for the chosen one trope, I that was definitely a favorite of mine too, especially growing up. I looking back on my old stories from when I've been writing since I was 6. I'm sure you relate. A lot
mhm,
of my stories followed the chosen one trope, and
mm,
I think because when you're a kid, there's so much in your life that is outside of your control. You
mm,
have your parents telling what to do, your teachers, schools, and the chosen one kind of allows you, the character, to be gifted or appointed a role.
mhm.
And now you're able to kind of rise to that challenge. And so for me, that was just very appealing. It gave me an escape, in my brain while I'm writing these stories.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's one of the appeals actually of the chosen one, is that yeah, it can take these seemingly ordinary people, often teenagers, because it's seen quite commonly in like YA fantasy, for example. Like Katniss, for example, she's I think supposed to be a teenager, but it's
Mm-hmm.
just that idea of it could be me because it's like just like they seem quite normal before this kind of prophecy or whatever is thrust upon them. And yeah, I think there's a lot to be said for like younger readers, definitely. Like, for me, when I was younger, it would be reading like His Dark Materials by Philip
Mm-hmm.
Pullman. So like Lyra, like, she's a child, but she and not one who's endowed with any kind of magical abilities or anything. She's just very, 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 very stubborn. And yeah, she ends up kind of saving the world, saving multiple worlds, in fact.
So let's talk about the major components of the chosen one trope and their examples. I identified chosen ones uh okay, into a couple different groups. One was characters that are uniquely situated to solve a problem by destiny.
Mm.
Then we have characters that are uniquely situated to solve a problem by proxy or circumstances, such as being elected by others.
Mm-hmm.
Then we have characters who may be born or bequeathed unique gifts that make them unique. And then
Mm-hmm.
we have characters born into royalty. Characters must be born into royalty, allowing them certain privileges, access, and resources. So I have examples for each, but I wanted to see if, like, did I catch all the circumstances that you would find a chosen one?
I think so. That sounds very comprehensive.
Okay. What are some of your favorite components and examples?
So definitely, like, I feel like a big one is the idea of a prophecy, um, dictating that this person is going to be, uh, special in some way. Is going to end up saving whatever it is, world or people or yeah, whatever the kind of destiny is. But I'm going to go back to Lyra here because there's a prophecy at play, but I think another important aspect of this is that she's not aware of the prophecy for quite a long time of
Mm.
the trilogy. And it's that's actually part of the prophecy is that she shouldn't find out that she is Eve, as in like the Genesis biblical sense.
Mm-hmm.
She's Eve and Will is Adam, but she shouldn't find out about that. And they're supposed to end original sin, and it's there's a lot of religious kind of messages going on in this book, and this I said this book. I always count it as one book, but it's a trilogy.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, so I think another part of that prophecy is them not being aware, and I'm sure there are other books where that's the case. Like there's prophecies that the chosen one doesn't become aware of until later. So that seems like quite an important thing, because it's almost like them finding out the prophecy is like a big moment of like an epiphany, or either like they become very doubtful, or they're like, oh, I really need to do this then, kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. Do you think it's better for a character to not know that they've have been a part of a prophecy? I'm thinking of an example where someone was informed that they were in a prophecy. We have Neo in the Matrix, where he is
Mm.
yanked out because he's been prophesied or prophesied. I don't know the
Mhm.
correct way to say that word. Um,
Me neither.
and now there's a huge amount of pressure, and he's like, I don't know if I can do this. Rather
Mm.
than had you not known, and you are going after your goal simply because of your own conviction and belief systems.
Yeah, yeah, that's a good point. if you think about it from your own personal perspective, you're like, wow, that's a lot of pressure to suddenly be like, yeah, there's a prophecy and you need to do this and save us all kind of thing. Maybe them not being aware of it makes it that easier in a way, like for them to just kind of carry on down their path and be like slowly kind of mentored down the correct pathway. But I think ultimately it comes to a point where they need to know it because usually there's like this, the field of self-doubt and not, they have challenges and they fail at points and get to a stage where they're kind of thinking, I'm gonna not going about to defeat this great evil or whatever it is. So being made aware of the prophecy can be something that's strengthening for them, but being aware of it from the outset, yeah, like Neo is a bit of a messes with his head majorly, doesn't it? And it's like, do I want to do this or shall I just go back and pretend none of this is happening? And which would be a tempting choice because again, huge amount of pressure for one person to take on.
Yeah. Especially if, like, let's say a hypothetical situation, you are and I are called to we have a destiny and we must save this certain community that we've never actually been a part of or we need to now learn about. And so
Mm-hmm.
I have to overcome this huge hump of what is the actual investment? And
Yeah.
what does the prophecy fill that void? Or do you have to, from a writer's perspective, also build in some personal stakes so that the main character wants to pursue this goal?
Yeah, I would say so. Big because otherwise it feels a bit flat. I don't It feels like if they haven't got some kind of personal investment, whatever that may be, it doesn't have to be like family or personally knowing if it's like saving the world, that's like, yeah, okay. You can't really be personally invested in everyone in the world, but you can appreciate that certain aspects of it are important for you, if you see what I mean. Like
Mm-hmm.
it feels like there has to be some kind of personal drive, I think. Otherwise, it just feels a bit like there's someone who's just doing what they're told and not really thinking about what it means for them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And when you take away the prophecy for stories that don't have prophecies and you have main characters that are going based just on their personal drives and motives, then that's when I see like Katniss Everdeen in Hunger
Yeah.
Games.
Mm-hmm.
And even, I mean, I don't know if Clark Kent Superman has necessarily a prophecy. I guess maybe he did when their father said to now I'm trying to like pick my brain, my memory right now. But there isn't a prophecy for Superman, is there?
If I'm sure in like the Henry Cavill films, they talk about like his dad, Russell Crowe, leaves a message is like something about saving or
Saving the
protecting.
world that you're destined. Okay, so maybe that is not
Maybe,
a
but
good.
I'm not. I don't know the comics. My husband would be mad at me if he heard this because he's like a massive comic book person. Whereas I'm just
Okay.
like, yeah, the films are good. Um,
Okay, maybe I'll go off of Smallville then. Because
there you go. Yeah.
favorite show growing up, and you have this teenage boy that has a really good father for a role model and is just taught, if you have gifts, you should use them to help others. And so I
Mm.
feel like that, someone who is uniquely situated to solve a problem by circumstance. Um, is there a prophecy for Frodo, or is that by circumstance?
Yeah, I would say that's circumstance. In he finds himself left the ring. Basically inherits it, doesn't he, from Bilbo.
Mm-hmm.
So definitely just kind of finds himself flung into this situation. And it's interesting because yeah, the films are, I'm a massive fan. I think I tried to read the books when I was like 12, semi-successful. I've recently tried to read them again and I don't know. I really want to get into it, but I'm like still in the bit where Frodo gets given the ring. I didn't realize how long it stretched out for. And
Mm.
like Gandalf goes off and finds information and just like Frodo just kind of has the ring and doesn't really do much for years. Um, but in the films, it's obviously much more fast paced than that. And he suddenly, when Gandalf comes and tells him, doesn't he, that it's like this is the one ring and you need to go and destroy this thing. And it's
Mm-hmm.
kind of just like, oh, okay.
I think Frodo was really scared too when he first found
Yeah.
out. It's a lot of pressure.
Mhm.
Um, and then I move on to, let's see, characters born or bequeathed unique gifts that make them unique. I had Buffy Summers with powers every time there's a chosen one. That's the a vampire slayer. That one was really big over here. I don't know if you guys.
Yes,
Yeah.
I
Okay.
did watch that when I don't know when that was on TV, well, like 20 years ago, I want to
Oh
say,
yeah.
maybe a bit more. But yeah, I definitely watched that when I was younger.
Yeah. So
Um,
one person dies, and another person's just magically chosen, and they get these gifts to fight vampires.
yeah. Yeah, so that's definitely a good example. Like she's kind of like it's almost like she definitely has no choice because she's just has this gift now. So it's like, yeah, if you don't do that, no one else is going to do it.
Mm-hmm. Which sucks. And I guess that's also like you're uniquely situated to solve a problem by circumstances. So it's kind of, I guess maybe it's a subcategory of that. Also, same with royalty. Your
Mm.
circumstances that you're born into royalty and you have privileges. I think of Sailor Moon. She's the moon princess, and she's given all of these gifts and expectations that she has to do things. Um, I think there's also a prophecy involved in that one, so I guess it all crisscrosses.
Hmm. Yeah, I think that a lot of these components, yeah, like they're a bit enmeshed, aren't they? Like there's no one of these that makes a chosen one. It's kind of multiple aspects of these things, and which yeah, I think makes it's still an interesting trope to me, as much as we've seen it so much. Um, I think it's still an enjoyable trope because of the reason that we said, like it's almost sometimes a bit of a blank character that we can put ourselves onto. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but another thing that I don't know if you've got this on your list is like um the big sacrifice that the chosen one has to make at the end.
Oh, yes. Yes. What are your
Um,
examples?
well, again, I had Frodo again because he's obviously, I think it's like he's got semi like PTSD
Mm-hmm.
after they go back to Hobbiton and he can't really live a normal life, can he? He's just kind of mentally and physically scarred from what they went through, and ends up going to I can't remember the name, the Elven.
So like an afterlife
Yeah, like
metaphor.
he like goes on the ship
Mm-hmm.
with the elves at the end, and like basically will never go back to Middle Earth, and he's kind of just like traumatized. So he's like, yeah, I'm gonna go because I can't live a normal life here. So
Mm-hmm.
that's he's dealing with the mental scars of what he had to go through. So that feels like a big sacrifice. And then another one, again, I'm going to mention her a lot, but Lyra, because it's my favorite series of books, so I just can't get away from it. But her big sacrifice is having to say goodbye to the person that she loves in Will. And, if you haven't read these stories, then I apologize for the spoilers, but they are like 20 plus years old. Um,
That ending
but
was devastating. I was sad.
oh my God, like seriously, like the TV shows like coming up to the final series now, and I'm like dreading the bit where they have to say goodbye because absolutely heartbreaking. But is yeah, a massive sacrifice for her to make as like a 13-year-old. Yeah, it felt like a big thing.
Yeah. I can see, yeah, in the Matrix, there's like a sacrifice that it kind of gets used as like a final point of victory where you have Neo who dies in the hallway, but that's what actually helps him to bring him to his final form. And finally
Yeah.
now he's the chosen one. And then even Harry Potter just walks into that forest where Voldemort is and lets himself get blasted away because that's what's needed. And he doesn't fully die at the end, but that sacrifice was made. I'm trying to think if there's any other ones I could think of off the top of my head. We talked about it a little bit as far as
Yeah.
like how the chosen one trope is easy to kind of place yourself in it. But why do you think it's so popular?
So apart from what I've already said, about them being someone we could really relate to, I think
Mm-hmm.
again, another part of that is in often in chosen one stories, there's like a really clear distinction between good and bad because it's like they have to overcome this bad thing. And real life is really not that clear cut. Like things are a lot more grey than they are just kind of one end of the spectrum or the other. But I think it's good in a way of having these books that are very kind of like this is right and this is wrong, especially for younger readers where perhaps they're in the process of forming like a moral compass. It could be helpful to see those kind of distinctions as much as yeah, real life is never going to be that simple. But when you're growing up and forming these kind of ideas, it can help to simplify it. Um, and yeah, I just think there's perhaps maybe all of us want to be the chosen one a little bit, like just the idea that we can affect change on a massive scale and make the world a better place. It's a nice idea. The idea that one person could do that.
Yeah. Well, that's actually a really interesting segue to the next question, where the chosen one isn't unique to fiction. And
Mm.
we can look at any prophet or king throughout history. You have people that are uniquely placed in a position by inheritance or birthright with a goal of accomplishing something on behalf of society that they
Mhm.
believe no one else can accomplish. So when you take the fictional trope and you apply it to the real world, one of
Mhm.
my favorite examples of this is King Henry VIII, who believed God
Ah,
spoke through him and he didn't need the church. And he used his own versions of things to justify his many marriages. He killed several of his
yeah,
wives. Scary, terrifying idea of a chosen one. What do you have any idea examples of that?
I do, and this was a really interesting question because I was like, what, who? I can't think of anyone, but so I did some research, and I found a really interesting one that was like an oracle in ancient Greece who was basically consulted by people from Greece and Rome called the Delphic Oracle. So
Mhm.
she was a priestess of Apollo. She spoke in riddles and would have those riddles kind of examined and interpreted by the prophetai. I'm probably pronouncing that completely wrong, but that's where we get the word prophet and prophecy from. So I found that really interesting. And basically, she apparently helped the Greeks win the Persian War and predicted her own downfall, like in terms of the Church of Apollo, because at that time Christianity was basically becoming the main religion in ancient Rome. So she
Wow. So she
profited.
predicted her own downfall?
Yeah, like basically when there was an emperor that tried to kind of fight back against Christianity.
Mhm.
Um, and when he sent a messenger to her to ask for a prophecy, she said, I'm massively paraphrasing, but something along the lines of just tell him that the Church of Apollo is falling and yeah, so she could see. I don't know whether that was just being very astute in terms of seeing Christianity spreading already and that it was too late. But yeah, to be able to prophesy your own downfall, I found that quite impressive.
That's like the sacrifice at the
Yeah,
end.
yeah.
Interesting.
So that
Okay.
was an interesting one. But then I kind of, yeah, Henry VIII definitely is a big one, actually forming a church so that he could divorce um, his first wife, I think it was, so he could marry Anne Boleyn.
Hmm.
That's obviously had a lasting impact in the UK. And but then I was thinking, like, does it have to be like figures in kind of royalty or that kind of high position? Because I was like, could people who just like are basically ordinary, but who
Hmm.
affected massive change in their time? So people like Rosa Parks, Emmeline Pankhurst, they obviously had massive impacts in their periods of time. But then I was like, were they seen as that at the time? Were they seen as these huge figures, or was it only with hindsight that we could go back and go, these were in certain elements could be seen as like the chosen one because of the impact their actions had on like the civil rights movement, suffragettes. Like at the time, they were probably seen as troublemakers, right?
Yeah.
But now we look back on them, we're like, wow, they did amazing things.
So how would you distinguish the chosen one trope from another trope, the one
Mm-hmm.
who chooses?
Yeah, I think the chooses bit is like the key element there, isn't it?
Hmm.
Chosen one is like we've said, kind of either prophesied, prophesied,
Hmm. Or
however you
yeah,
can.
a prophesied prophecy. I don't know. Or appointed.
Yes, as
Yeah.
like it's like their fate. They're told by uh, a person or a group of people, or like a god, or they're born into a circumstance. It's not their choice ultimately. So thinking about that, it was like they often have this real grappling to accept that chosen one position. We see that in a lot of stories. Whereas the one who chooses is making a decision, and they're probably going through, extensive training or tests because they know where they want to go. So they're kind of pushing themselves towards that path. Whereas the chosen one is going to be pushed towards that path to an extent until they get to the point where they're like, yeah, I'm going to do this. They may have encouragement from like friends or mentors or whatever it may be. So it's definitely that person who chooses is acting under their own volition kind of thing, and
Mm-hmm.
chosen is propelled forward by something outside of themselves.
Yeah, I think this one got me thinking a lot about Hunger Games because you have Katniss Everdeen, who I kind of identified as a chosen one earlier, but I think that's because her story kind of dips in and out of it. You have her choosing to stand in place of her sister, so I feel
Yeah.
like that's her choosing, but
Mhm.
then later she kind of becomes appointed as the face of the rebellion, and she is made to do these commercials and all this propaganda where she
Mm.
starts to feel very outside of her autonomy. But when she's given her own autonomy to fight on her level, if I remember correctly, I feel like she just felt better about it.
Yeah.
Although I think the whole time she hated that she was in the circumstances anyway.
Yeah, I think she's yeah. With Katniss, it's almost like whenever someone she loves or cares about is in danger, is when she chooses to take proactive uh the paths, if you see what I mean. Like she yeah, volunteers on behalf of her sister. She reacts to the attack on the hospital in district, I forget, 7, or I can't remember which one it is, but she is very like, yeah, I'm gonna fight against the capital when there's a threat against someone that she cares about. So that's almost like a big part of what propels her forward, I think. And yeah, she's very reluctant to be like the face of the rebellion, but it's almost like a necessity in terms of well, being able to save like Peter, for example.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so it becomes something she realizes she has to do if she wants to save the people that she loves.
What do you think of I guess it's in and of itself could be a trope, when Katniss volunteers to save her sister and her drive and her motive is to save her sister, but that same sister gets killed off later. I've
Mm,
seen that repeated in other stories. Like your whole entire motive is shot. How does that
mm.
affect the overall? Like, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it it's almost like, do you think that the author uses that as a reason to kind of cause rage, or like a moment where it's trying to push them forward even more to that end goal rather than like to lose momentum?
Mm,
I'm trying to think of another example of a story where that happens, and it's almost frustrating in a way, but at the same time it's kind of realistic to that story because yeah, we got President Snow doing terrible things, and I think it would almost be a bit like plot armorish if everyone kind of survived and it was all great at the end. So I do appreciate stories where um there are losses like that that have an impact on the chosen one, and it I don't know, it almost makes them more relatable, I guess, in a way. It's another part of them dealing with like human struggles as they're trying to also take on like the entire world on their shoulders.
yeah. It almost seems like this elevation of stakes
Mm,
where at the beginning we were like, okay, it's about the sister. We're keeping the sister safe. But at this point, it's like it's about the entire society.
yeah,
And now the sister's gone, but there's still an entire society to fight for. But I'm even trying to like, did Katniss ever actually care about all of the society? I'm trying to remember. I know she was devastated when she lost her sister.
yeah. I think it gets to a point where when she goes to district, is it 13? Yeah, that's the one where there's like a seat, like they didn't realize it was still there.
Mm-hmm.
A while since I've read the books or watched the films, but yeah, I think part of her, she makes friends with like the other tributes, for example, when they get sent back in, um and kind of builds like companionships with a lot of them, and I don't know.
Mhm.
There's also that reticence where she realizes like they've basically volunteered her for this rebellion, and she didn't want agree to it and didn't know anything about it. And but yeah, I think a part of it is like her coming around to caring about the
Like the
injustices,
yeah, that's
that
true.
yeah, like
I
maybe she
sorry, go
doesn't
ahead.
she doesn't want to be like she's like pissed off that she's become the face of the rebellion, but I don't think that means she doesn't want President Snow taken down.
Mhm. The most fascinating part I found since we're talking about this series is the idea that there's supposedly salvation in that other district. But then
Mm,
at the very end, she ends up killing that president too because she recognizes that same power hunger. And
yeah, yeah.
sometimes the very person that is like against the system or whatever, that is
Mm,
pushing for like, the riots and everything, might actually be just as dangerous, might be like the same person of a different shade. I don't know.
absolutely. Yeah, I think so. Is that idea of like if you just remove the bad person, so Snow, and replace him with the woman that Julianne Moore played, who I can't remember her name,
Me neither.
but yeah, like she was very grey, wasn't she? Like wore a lot of grey. But like yeah, the idea of just replacing him with her would somehow fix it when actually like if there's someone who is got those similar traits, it doesn't take much to kind of corrupt someone who is seemingly in a position where they want to help, but power is I guess something that's quite can be quite intoxicating.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's you don't solve a hugely broken system by just like replacing the person at the top. You have to challenge the entire system. And doesn't that trilogy end with a basically her being like, yeah, this is probably going to happen again, but
Mhm.
we're just going to enjoy this while it lasts.
Yes. So realistic. I
Yeah,
bet you, I mean, both presidents thought they were the chosen one in their
yeah,
respective way.
oh yeah.
Do you have any other examples of the one who chooses trope before I move on?
Not that I can think of, no.
Okay.
I'm sure there are many, but like seriously, my brain is not
It's
cooperating.
okay. I'm a little foggy headed today. So I walk around the house and I'm like dizzy. It's wonderful. So that actually segues really well into the next section, which is, talking about the positives and downsides of the chosen trope. How, we have chosen ones who are heroes, and then you have villains who think they're the chosen ones. So I guess let's start with what are the positives to the chosen one trope?
Just the idea that there can be one person that can save the world. I think that feels strangely hopeful in when we're dealing with a world of our own that is complete mess. The idea that if one person can affect change, maybe we'll be okay. Like maybe if we get a different person in charge of the country, like for you, president, for us, prime minister, maybe it'll be okay. Like I know ultimately that's not how simple life is, but it just leaves us with this idea of hope,
Yeah.
maybe.
I agree,
Uh,
especially for middle grade as
mm,
children get into reading books. And because
mhm.
when you're younger, it's your narrow your point what your narrow you have a very narrowed focus, right?
Yeah.
And being able to read characters that are, first of all, it's easy to build a narrative around one central character, but children also relate to them well, and it's an opportunity to teach them good work ethic, teach them values, how to value other people and
Yeah.
stand up for other people. So
Mhm.
I think that it's a useful tool for those things.
Definitely. And I think it's good also that we're seeing chosen one figures from like marginalized groups more and more.
Hmm.
So it's all very well saying like the chosen one trope is massively overused, but actually it's not for certain groups of people because historically we've seen like, cisgendered white male chosen one figures slowly started seeing more female, and then we've got more black and ethnic minority, trans, non-binary, all those kind of marginalized groups where it was basically non-existent previously.
Hmm.
So I think that's good. Like that, as much as the chosen one is tired from a certain perspective, i.e., cisgender white males, seeing them from different groups is interesting, and seeing different takes on it. You know, people who are applying their own kind of experiences, cultural backgrounds, all those kind of things, brings a whole new light to the chosen one trope. So I think that's great. Like a big example I'm thinking of is like Decker in the Gilded Ones, which is a book that has been on my TBR for ages. But I'm like really looking forward to reading it. And I'm sure there's a whole wreath of other books with this kind of new take on the chosen one, coming from a completely different background than we've seen previously. And I think that's a massive positive, is that we're now able to read these way more diverse books.
Agreed. So then what are the downsides? Aside from just being like a lot of it, as far
Yeah.
as character development, maybe.
I think I like on this at the same time as it can feel hopeful, it's also quite a toxic idea. I think that just one person can save the world or society or whatever it may be. Like I said about removing one figurehead and replacing with another is not going to fix a broken system. That is the same kind of idea, that you can't just take one person and they defeat the evil and then everything's fine, and we just like move on now, and we won't worry about why that happened in the first place, or what systems were in place to cause this evil to come to power. You know, it's there are books that are probably guilty of not really examining why a certain, well, I'm just using the word evil, you know, replace that with what you will, but why a certain evil has been allowed to kind of grow. And like, for example, like the Handmaid's Tale actually is like a big example there, isn't it? Like that, where oh my god, I can't remember what the government's called in that, my brain today, where that government has come into power, and it's kind of like, how did this happen? What could we have done to stop this? And just the idea that, you know, you couldn't just replace the president of I keep wanting to say Panem, but that's Hunger Games.
I know the story of The Handmaid's Tale, I think because it's a little traumatizing for me. I haven't watched it yet.
Scary, yeah.
It's just too close.
um yeah, it's definitely too close. So just the idea that you can, yeah, replace one bad guy and
Hmm.
save the world is too simplistic in terms of real life. Because it takes more than one person to implement change in a deeply toxic society,
Hmm.
and it takes, you know, years and years of fighting. It takes many people to root out like evil, whether it's possible at all. You know, sometimes it feels a bit too hopeless. So yeah, I just think ultimately you can't just say this one person's going to save the world. Is That's not real life.
No. Well, and it got me thinking of Harry Potter because,
Mm.
at the end of the series, he's defeated Voldemort, and I guess we're supposed to believe that that's it. But as you went through the series, you realized how complex this world system is and how corrupt. I
Mm.
mean, there's a reason why, and I mean, it's stuff that we can all examine from history, Nazi Germany, and
Yeah.
citizens being compliant with evil intentions, and
Mm.
being able to, like, okay, we got rid of the figurehead, but
Mm.
the things that allowed a group of people to look the other way or even comply against like mass genocide, like that's a systemic issue that needs to be looked at. And how do you even solve that?
Exactly.
You just replace the figurehead with another figurehead.
Yeah.
Um,
So
oh, sorry, go ahead.
no, I was just going to say, it's just, yeah, it just doesn't feel real to life. And as much as people do read fantasy stories for an escape, I think there's a lot of value in fantasy stories exploring real life issues as well.
Hmm. I also found the downside of the chosen one trope would be that the conditions that support a chosen one trope is actually a really prime foundation for a villain
Mm.
because life seems to cater to them. And I
Mm.
immediately think of Daenerys Targaryen, how she felt like she was chosen in her birthright, and even in circumstances, how she was able to, grow and learn and build
Mhm.
upon her, rule. But
Mhm.
then, I mean, we don't know how the book series is going to end, but as far as the rushed ending of the season,
Uh,
the idea is that power corrupts, and
yeah.
there's little, bugs. What's the word I want to use? Easter eggs or little hints throughout the whole series where you can kind of see power corrupting from someone feeling like they've been the chosen one the whole time. And so yeah, I can
Yeah.
see every single villain is really a chosen one in their own right.
Oh yeah, definitely. And I hope we get to read how George R. R. Martin deals with Daenerys' downfall if he goes down that road. I think there are, yeah, like you said, there's hints, there's her family history and stuff like that. The TV show handled it terribly and rushed it and made it just this unbelievable change, like switch in her, which it could have been done really, really well, I think. And it would have been very interesting to see her kind of descent into madness. But definitely you see throughout like her just feeling as though she's kind of untouchable in a way because she is meant to be the ruler of Westeros. So she kind of that is like what leads her on, isn't it? That's she's just like, yeah, I'm gonna get over that. Doesn't matter what I have to do. I'm gonna get the ships that I need. I'm gonna get the soldiers that I need. I'm gonna make it over there just because I was born a Targaryen, and so it's my birthright.
Mm-hmm. I read somewhere that all chosen ones have a fatal flaw. Do you think this is true?
I think a lot of them do, and I think it's part of making them human and relatable. I'm sure there are some that don't have and are just like perfect chosen ones, but then that feels a bit to me like Mary Sue and whatever the male equivalent is of that. Gary Sue? Gary Sue.
Is it a Gary Sue? Let me
I
see.
know.
I need to look this up now. It's Gary Stew.
Stu, there we go. It couldn't have been Sue. That's yeah, okay. Gary Sue and Gary Stu. Yeah. So yeah, if they don't have a fatal flaw, it feels a bit too like, yeah, they're just perfect and great. And a character that springs to mind there for me is Quoth in Name of the Wind, and like he's an interesting character, but like he can just do everything amazingly well. And becomes a bit annoying to the extent that you're like, yeah, all right, you're just perfect at everything you do. It's great.
Yeah.
Um,
And that
whereas
turns readers and viewers away when
yeah,
they feel that way.
yeah. So I think actually having a flaw is important in a way, and if you want readers to connect with your character, like I'm going back to Katniss again. Like I think her fatal flaw is that she acts kind of a little bit impulsively, maybe when people that she loves are in danger. Like volunteering in the first place. That's just like a knee jerk reaction, isn't it, to her sister being picked out?
Mm-hmm.
Um, so that could be a bit of a flaw. Is like just not thinking things through very well, just acting on impulse as soon as someone you love is in danger. But it also makes her a character that you care about because she cares so deeply about the people around her.
Mm-hmm.
And another one that came to mind was Fitz from Robin Hobb's Farseer trilogy. And I don't know if you could really define him as like a chosen one in the sense of like he has a destiny to fulfill, but he does have a massive impact on the people around him. In like he's a bastard son of royalty and is taken in by um the Farseer. I think they're called the Farseer line of like kings, but like him being even just being around them changes the decisions that they make. So he's an important character, but he's also kind of a kid that's just like bumbling his way through and like making poor decisions, and you kind of grow up with him as the series goes on. So yeah, I think his fatal flaw is that he is just human and he's just like finds himself um he learns that he's a bastard child of royalty and he's like, oh, okay, so that's I didn't expect that, and just yeah, trying to live his life and understand what that means.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I when I was thinking of what a fatal flaw would be, my mind came to Anakin Skywalker because I thought he was a good example of what happens when you lean into your fatal flaw, and maybe that's what it takes to go from hero to villain. But
Yeah,
he was the chosen one. He was prophesied by, when they met him with the metachlorine. I don't. Sorry, Star Wars fans, you can be mad at me. My brain's not 100% right now. Anyway, so the thing that seemed to be his fatal flaw was that he seemed to have too much passion or too much emotion. He was never really
Mm.
able to fulfill what the Jedi needed of him, which is to kind of
Yeah.
like watch his feelings. And as a result, the dark side was able to take advantage of him and manipulate him and turn him. And I thought that was like a very big way to show that a chosen one has a fatal flaw. But part of me also wondered, and I think this was brought up in another episode that I did on doomed mentors, which is, was Obi-Wan a good mentor to him? Was he surrounded with the right people? You have the Jedi Order, which had all these really high expectations. Were they the best system to support someone who
Mm.
had, he was taken away from his family and then his mother was killed? All these things about him. It's like when you have a child in real life who has depression or intrusive thoughts, and you as a system around that child don't support them adequately, and then you wonder why, when they grow up, are they so angry or they do things.
Exactly. That really resonates because I'm a counselor and work with like young people, and it's yeah, the idea that is yeah, Obi-Wan's a bit like, why can't you just control your emotions? It's not that difficult. When it is difficult, if you've been through multiple traumatic experiences, and it's almost like, yeah, he kind of gets like the dark side, like the Emperor's like, yeah, just let yourself feel the anger, like just let it out. And Obi-Wan is not like that. He's like, no, you got to rein it in. And if you're someone who's been through difficult experiences, someone who's struggling with mental health issues, you can't just rein things in. You can't just stop yourself feeling things. Or if you do, it ends up ultimately bursting out of you, because it's got to come out sometime.
Mm-hmm.
So his reaction ultimately makes a lot of sense. And the way that Anakin's story goes makes sense from that point of view. Like he needed some counseling, and he did not
Mm-hmm.
receive the support that maybe would have meant he would have chosen differently.
We have a listener question. Someone submitted a question on the chosen one trope.
Mm-hmm.
So this one kind of reflects what we've already talked about, where they feel like, it's all everywhere. But the question was, why won't the chosen one trope die?
Oh, yeah, I think it's just there's more you can do with it. Like as much as it's so popular, we've seen it in so many stories. Ultimately, writers, and especially writers, in the fantasy genre, we're all just retelling what is essentially the same story. And I just think if you're using a trope anyway as an author, what's important is being able to put your own spin on it. And I think we're seeing that more and more now. We know we're seeing, like I said earlier, people from more diverse backgrounds are finally being kind of encouraged and being given voices where previously they weren't. And so that's kind of seen perhaps a bit of a revitalization of like the chosen one trope or other tropes as well, in terms of we're seeing new people in the chosen one role. So I think part of it still being so popular and not dying is that it's almost kind of started again from square one, from these marginalized groups, from writers who are from different backgrounds, who aren't just white men. Um, so in a way, I think we should cherish that. We should say, okay, yeah, if it's a chosen one that is a white man and is a story we've seen 100 million times before, yeah, okay, that's just boring. But if we're seeing a chosen one that's different, is a person from a different background than we're used to, has been through different experiences, is being written from the point of view of a completely new culture, then I think that needs to be encouraged, really, because yeah, white writers have kind of had their fill of the chosen one, but that doesn't mean that writers from marginalized groups have. They've kind of only just begun in a way.
That's a really good point. As one of my biggest challenges, because my books are own voice and I write from a Vietnamese American perspective, is that
Yeah.
it's already really hard
Mm.
to figure out and dissect your own intergenerational traumas and information from your culture, making
Mm.
sure that you're doing it adequately, to then be feel like you don't have access to some of these tropes because people happen to be sick of them would
Yeah.
definitely be very challenging. And it's nice to be able to go, okay, there's some tried and true tropes that mean a lot to a lot of people. And now I can just do my own research and my own learning. Like there's been a lot of space between my last two manuscripts because I had to do a lot of healing, and
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot of dissection that has to be done with your own identity when you're writing from own voice. And it's just comforting to know I can choose one of these tropes and write to them.
Mm, exactly. Like, yes, they are tired tropes if it's, a white male author writing them, but they're not tired from other groups that have never had the opportunity to explore these tropes. I think, yeah, it's like I said earlier, it's really interesting. I think actually gives a whole new spin to, yes, what could be seen as an overused trope, but actually gives it a new lease of life in a way.
Mm-hmm. So then, speaking of death and dying, I thought it'd be kind of fun to put together a quick exercise. It's a real, I guess, put yourself in the situation in the real world. There's a zombie outbreak, and you've received a prophecy that you're the chosen one, and only you can restore the world back the way that it was. So, what would you do in that situation?
Oh boy. I mean, I am squeamish as heck. So I would be very like, why? Why me?
You'd question it first. You'd be like, no.
Like this is not like I pass out of the sight of blood. Like, are you sure? Like, and then I've been going for a lot of questioning. I'd eventually probably go over that. Like maybe if something happens to like my home village or my dog gets killed, then I'm like, okay, I've got to do something about this zombie outbreak because that's not happening. Like that's just I can't deal with that. So I'd then probably seek out some kind of mentor because I know nothing about fighting zombies, so gonna need someone to help me through that, and also some kind of way of killing zombies that is non-gory.
Mm-hmm.
It's the only time I've ever seen a zombie being killed. It's very, very gory, and I'm like, yeah, can we just like quietly
Yeah.
just smother them with a pillow?
Or something that's not so physical, because I
Yeah,
feel like my husband's like sleeping and he's like a dead weight. I don't know if I could drag him across the floor.
yeah. Oh my God, it just feels like it would be really labor intensive.
How
Like,
would you find a mentor? Would you go to the internet? Go on Twitter?
yeah. Oh yeah, you got to like. Does anyone know how to kill zombies like in a non-bloody way?
Start a Facebook group.
Hashtag zombie outbreak. Like hell. Yeah. So I guess yeah, in this day and age, you're gonna find someone that knows how to do these things. And I don't know. I suppose it's then chosen ones seem to like get up a little group around them, don't they? Like cheerleaders. So I'm gonna need some people doing that, like pumping me on into my
Mhm.
role as a chosen one.
You need a
Uh,
sidekick.
oh yeah, I need a psychic. I would choose an animal probably because I like an animal sidekick. Um, so yeah, probably actually my family dogs are really like a couple of them are gun dogs. They would be very useful. They're good at like killing small critters, so
Yeah.
that would be helpful. Yeah, and then where are we going? So we're on the quest. I feel like a zombie outbreak. Do you think there's going to be like, I'm thinking Game of Thrones here. Is there like a main king zombie that I've got to kill? Like,
Ooh, that
you
makes
know,
sense.
and
Yeah.
then the rest of them will die. So
And
that feels like it's an easier mountain to climb. Just got to
yeah.
kill one main one.
So you got to find out about it, and you got to go questing across the country to go find
Yeah,
it. Go
yeah,
back to like what do they call it? Like the Fallout Zone or whatever Patient Zero
yeah,
is or whatever.
exactly. So go on a little trek. At this point, I don't know why I'm imagining like I can't use a car. I'm just walking across the country.
Oh,
Um,
that's scary. I would have great anxiety watching you.
you should not have much hope in my succeeding.
I don't know about your chances now.
I'm like, I haven't got any weapons. I've just got a dog.
A dog.
The dragon.
Maybe the dog's bark like makes their head explode, and then you
Oh,
don't have to touch them.
yeah. You know, I like that. And I don't need to look like as the head explodes. That's good. I
Yeah.
like that. Yeah.
You just make sure the dog barks everywhere you go. And it's like you have this radar safe zone around you because their heads are exploding.
Luckily, the dog I'm thinking of, Aria, is very loud. So she would work. It's good. Yeah, so then King Zombie is dead, and I've fluked my way through a zombie outbreak, basically, and somehow saved the world.
Will
I
people know what you did?
hope not. I feel like there'll be a lot of mess to
You're like, I
clean
want to be
up.
left alone. Like I had to deal enough with your guys' issues.
Dead zombies with their heads exploded. Like, oh,
You're
sorry
like, I
about
don't
that.
want to see another person for a while.
I'm gonna go and live with my dog somewhere quiet and not want to be in civilization. Yeah, also I would not want to deal with the cleanup as the chosen one.
Oh yeah.
Like I'm like, I've just saved the world. Like, come on, you can deal with the zombie bodies.
You should sacrifice yourself before the cleanup. And then at least that's one thing that you don't have
Yeah.
to worry about on your list.
Yeah, I think I just zombie outbreak is just I have thought about this because I used to watch The Walking Dead and I was like, I would be useless. I would literally be like to my husband, I'd be like, can you kill me? Because I don't want to live through this.
I was also concerned because we hear about these like, hypothetical situations where you're all on an island and everyone goes, whoever has a skill, you're worthwhile. The rest of you are useless. And I'm like, oh my God, I don't even know. This is
I can write. I can make lists.
I can make clothes. I can knit. I will keep you warm in the winter. There you go. That's
That's
what I'll do.
useful. There you go. I can't
Yeah.
even do that.
Oh.
Maybe throw a patch on something if that I really had to, but
You have to learn how to make beer real quick because everyone will value that and you'll have job
yeah.
security.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
All right. Well, Lucy, thank you so much for joining me on this conversation. I had so much fun. Do you have any last remarks or promotions that you'd like to share?
Well, I would love it if you checked out my debut book. So it's a YA dark fantasy called Awakening the Commune's Curse, book one. It's got found family in there. It's got the chosen one with a twist that I mentioned earlier. LGBTQ plus rep, mental health rep. It's got an authoritarian government and a struggling rebellion trying to bring it down. So yeah, that is available like most places that sell books basically. Check out my author website, which is lucyamclarenauthor.wordpress.com for more details.
Speculative Sandbox is a volunteer-run podcast that relies on the collaboration of fellow creators like you. Join the conversation and participate in fun polls and questionnaires on TikTok, Instagram, and Twitter. Interested in being in a future episode? Our DMs are open, or you can email speculativesandbox@gmail.com.